Okay, I am Jen Coido with the Association of Financial Educators, and I am so lucky to have some time this morning with Brad Sparks. Brad is the owner of Sparks Financial Education in Fort Collins. He's Colorado. He's also a member of AFE, and we had a chat this week, and he was telling me some amazing things about some successes he is having, and he had some really good tips of how to make the most of our program and webinars in general. So welcome, Brad, and thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for reaching out to me and asking kind of just about how to do webinars, I guess.
I really, you told me when we first talked earlier this week, you said this was your best year, one of your best years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You're doing all of your education remotely.
Yep. Man, yeah. And then outside of the education, 95% of my client meetings on in my planning practice. But yeah.
All virtual.
Mm-hmm.
And were you doing any percentage of it virtual before COVID?
Not my education. In my planning practice, about 50% of my client base is out of state anyway, or out of town. So I was doing a lot of planning meetings virtually, but no education.
And you just pivoted, and what did that look like for you in terms of engagement, success, getting people, to show up and to be involved?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been doing Sparks Financial Education before I became a member of AFE, but AFE has really helped me with that, just kind of spreading, my message and things like that. But so interestingly enough, my first, because I do a lot of work with universities, and so my first webinar that was my first education webinar had 300% of my average attendees with CSU. So I thought that was pretty encouraging. I think that's what really convinced me that I could continue to, work with AFE and do Sparks Financial successful. So, just kind of jumping in and trying that first one and seeing how successful it was.
Right.
That's really what launched that pivot.
And how did you populate that one? How were you populating your seminars earlier?
Yeah, so the ones on college that I would do on campus is usually I would have like a member of a student group or a professor that would kind of help me spread the word. I would kind of send them a flyer or something, and then they would spread the word. With that one, I just sent a Zoom. I was actually using Microsoft Teams. I switched between the two.
Okay.
But I just sent a link, a meeting ID, and a meeting link to the host, and they distributed it. And it was actually that simple.
That was my next question. I know a lot of our members can't wrap their brain around what it looks like when you're a member of AFE. We go out, we find a company, we vet them, we tell them all about financial education, we tell them about you, we set that introductory meeting. When you're scheduling a webinar, what does it look like from there? You reach out, you have this meeting with the point of contact, and then what happens?
Yeah, and so this is where I'm going to kind of go down a little bit of a rabbit trail, because I think that there are some important things to talk about before that actual conversation or in the midst of that conversation. Because yeah, we talk about the details of webinars and that stuff. But I also think that so my background is in geophysics. I'm a scientist. I'm not trained by nature in the finance industry. Now, over the last half decade, I've been training myself and taking tests, doing all those things, right, that the industry says that I'm capable and can do these things. But I think because of that, I've really established a planning practice that is education in nature. So I have my education company, but then even for the advisors out there that are just doing this as a part of their planning firm or advisory firm, like even in that realm for me, it's all education still. Like I am not selling to clients. I'm educating them on decisions and allowing them to make choices for themselves, just with a vast amount of knowledge that I've hopefully helped them have. And so I think it's really important, because I think that's why I've done well this year, is that in this time of COVID and social turmoil, and it's just been a crazy year, people do not want to be sold to. They want to make decisions out of empowerment and out of control, out of their control. And so, I, I think, my fellow advisors in my own firm, at least, I've seen the ones that are more sales natured or sales trained, to pick up on interpersonal cues or body language, or kind of use your presence and charisma to make a sale. And that, I just don't think works in this environment. I mean, people are already stressed. They really, don't want to be buying things.
Right.
So all that to be said, I'm very clear that that's how I am with when I'm talking to, the decision maker at a company. And I'm saying, like, look, this is just going to be an education. It's going to be a class. It's going to hopefully have things that your employees can take away from and do things on their own and improve their own lives. And if they want individualized help, then they can reach out to me via the feedback form, which I'll get into in a little bit. That kind of introduces my planning firm. It's just I'm up front that I have a planning firm, but the feedback form is really the only link in my classes in my planning firm. So all that being said, to actually answer your question, then what we talk about in that meeting is that there are a few things that we have to do if we're going to do a webinar. And so one of them, and really there's just two that I say explicitly, and then one I have in the back of my head. So the first one is, I will let the person know that if their employees decide to do this, that I really strongly ask that videos are on. It's hard. I can talk to a blank screen, but it's just harder, right? Like, I like to see verbal cues, and I like to interact. All my workshops are interactive. So I like to see who's engaged and who's nodding and things like that. The second thing is, before we get started, I have everybody go around and unmute themselves and introduce themselves, because I want them to just feel comfortable hitting the unmute button and talking, because, like I said, it's interactive. And so if nobody feels comfortable hitting unmute and not talking, then it's going to be a disaster, right? Like, I mean, it's just going to be so
they have that control. They can unmute themselves at any time.
Yes. And now sometimes,
not ever a disaster.
Yes. So sometimes in Zoom, you do have to, like, not always, but sometimes randomly, like, you'll have to change a setting to make sure that people can unmute themselves.
Right.
So, those are the kind of things that maybe you hop on 5 minutes before with the decision maker and just test to make sure the controls and that things are working in that regard. And then the third thing that I don't.
Real quick, do you always invite the decision makers to participate and engage? Do you require that, request that, leave that up to them?
I don't feel like I've ever said that they need to, but for some reason they always do. So I feel like I'm messaging it pretty implicitly.
Okay.
Like, this is for your company, so why would you not be here, kind of thing. Sure. And frankly, I mean, the last two that I've had, because I get about 20% of, about 80% of attendees fill out my survey. About 20% of those end up wanting to schedule a free consultation with my planning firm. And the last two that I've done, 2 people of those 20% were the actual decision makers. So in the last 2 that I've done, the decision makers have actually ended up becoming clients.
That's awesome.
So, and then the third thing that I don't share with the decision maker, but I take internally into the meeting, is I do not proceed into my into my webinar content until people actually answer my first question. So like I said, it's very interactive. My webinars are. And my first question that I ask, I do not move on until somebody answers, because I want them to get the sense that I'm not talking to them, right? Like, we are having a conversation, a good time, right? And so.
Is that always a different question? Like, depending on the topic, or do you ask one question every time?
Yeah, it's always usually the same question, because I have a set workshop process. And so it's usually always the same question.
You're going to tell me what the question is, or is it secret?
I mean, it's very content specific. So, I mean, I have like a calculator that shows gross potential earnings over someone's lifetime. And I'll use I'll talk to the decision maker ahead of time, just to make sure my salary that I'm putting in my calculator is not absurd or too low. Like, I don't want to make any employees mad, right? So,
right.
And then I'll calculate that over time and I'll ask, what does that mean to you, or what reactions do you have about that number? Because it's usually significant, right? Like, hopefully any advisor that's listening to this knows that anybody's real success lies in their ability to generate income, right? It's like all of anybody's financial success in life is driven on us. Like, we are the engine of our success.
Right.
And so that's the point I want to get across there, is that, usually, I mean, if someone's 35 years old making 100 grand a year with a 4% average income increase per year, I mean, they're going to have a $10 million potential or something around that. And that's real. I mean, that's significant, because most people who are 35 don't have anywhere near $10 million.
Right. Where is it going, Brad?
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of sets the stage for us to be like, okay, look, we're all really have really significant futures. We just have to be able to handle that well.
Yeah.
And so that's the first question I ask.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So back up a little bit more in terms of, we started to go down the path of when you set the meeting. Potential members ask me all the time, will I know how many people are going to be attending? Will I get a list of those names? Will I be able to connect with them directly, or is that not until after? So what does that part look like for you?
Yeah, and because I don't take a very sales heavy approach, I leave a lot of trust in that stuff. I mean, it's their company. I don't know why I would have the right to talk to these people individually. Like, I've never met them, right?
Right.
And they don't trust me. They don't know me. So I feel like I have to earn that right. And so really, I just say, okay, decision maker, here's what we've talked about, what this meeting is going to be. Please pass that information along. Here's the Zoom link. I've had some decision makers send me names and emails of attendees, but that's not common. Usually
Before or after?
before.
Oh, okay.
But and again, I tell my decision makers, like, look, in my feedback form or prior to, I might ask for a list of names and emails, but that's purely either for attendance reasons, or like, I will never use those lists to market or spam to, unless somebody gives me permission
Right.
to contact them. But yeah, typically I'm just having a conversation with a decision maker. I'm popping into a Zoom meeting. I have no idea how many people are going to be there, what they're going to look like, what their names are. I just kind of trust the company that that's going to happen.
This is everything we preach to our members and everything we tell prospective members about. You are the profile of our successful members. Our successful members tell us, I don't ask for names. I don't ask for info. I'll run into somebody at Starbucks and they'll go, oh, you were that guy that Zoomed in. Yeah, I actually wanted to talk to you, because it's the trust building, the relationship building. So thank you for saying all of that. Ideal length for a webinar, in your opinion? I know that a lot of pre-COVID, it was the 45-minute lunch and learn. Are you finding that that's a little too much? Not enough?
No, that's what I would do too. I would do about 45 minutes with a 15-minute Q&A. I usually didn't do lunch. I started doing lunch because I thought people liked free food, which they do like free food, but I don't want anybody in my webinars who's not interested in my content.
Right.
So I stopped enticing people with food, because it was just like empty ears, right?
And then you have to listen to chewing.
Yeah. So I still do 45 minutes. What I found though, because in person I was a lot more interactive. I tried to make jokes, or they're bad jokes. I try to get people to laugh, either whether it's with me or at me. And so it would kind of slow webinars down. What I've actually found is that usually I can get through all of my stuff in 40 minutes on a webinar, where it was about 45 to 50 in person. But it's still an hour long, because people have a lot of questions. So now when I'm doing about 40 minutes of content and 20 minutes of Q&A.
And they are asking questions. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. It's I mean, almost to a T. In fact, I did one of these, because this is how I've like built my planning practice, is because I started my planning practice 5 years ago, and then about 3 years ago started Sparks Financial Ed. So I was doing planning before I was doing planning and education, but I built my planning practice just doing education under my planning firm. So I was actually doing this with a new agent in my firm, and I was doing some education, and it was funny because it's a way different market than I'm in. And yet the trajectory was the same, in that I introduced myself, he introduces himself. We start the first question, start the thing, say the first question. It takes about a minute for anybody to answer. There's only about 1 or 2 people out of the eight people that were there that were like interactive. And then slowly you start to see a third, and then there's a fourth. And like, this is very common, at least with the webinars I'm doing, is that by 60% of the way in, everybody's interacting, or 80% of the people are interacting. But usually it's kind of a slow climb there. You can just tell, like, people are skeptical of financial people. And once they start seeing that my content isn't, trying to manipulate them into do something,
Right.
that then they start to build more trust. They see that their coworkers and colleagues are interacting. And then by the end of it, it's a really kind of enjoyable time, because we're having a whole dialogue, and then that just really kind of seamlessly leads into the Q&A. Like, I'm not like, okay, I'm done now it's time for questions and answers. It's kind of like they get a sense of I'm done, and we're just having a conversation for the next 20 minutes.
That's so great. So you alluded earlier to your follow-up survey. You were kind enough to share that with me, and I would like to be able to share that with other members with your permission.
Yeah.
It's super simple. I love that. You don't even,
is the average take time.
say again?
It's 65 seconds is the average time that people take to fill it out. So when I provide it in my webinars, I'll tell people that, like, look, this just takes 65 seconds. Please help me out here.
And that's the other thing you said. Rather than I'm trying to glean some more insight on you, you're saying, I need your feedback. Your feedback makes me better, right? That, I mean, again, like to appeal to people's sense of, this guy just spent an hour with us out of the goodness of his heart, help him out, help him continue to grow as an educator, right?
Yeah. And I think 6 of my 10 questions are truly about, like, what do they enjoy and what could I improve? I think the last 4 is like, what are more topics that you want to know about, which actually that's not just about me. That's because I do 3 webinars, usually a series of 3. I'm getting them to agree on that when we meet.
Okay.
And so I want to know, for that 3rd webinar, it's usually attendees' choice. So in question 7, it talks about what other financial topics do you want to know about, which helps me. If they want to plan personally, then I know what they're interested in. But if they don't, then I at least know that they've checked. I have topics for that 3rd webinar. And then the 8th question is their email. Oh, no, that was the 6th question. The 7th question is, do you want to schedule a complimentary consultation with my planning practice to talk about what we've just, discussed in the webinar, or any of the check boxes above. And then I have if yes, put your email. And then the 9th one is, do you want to be put on an email list for monthly educational emails? And if yes, so those last four are really the only ones that are kind of about me, right? Like from a marketing perspectives.
Right. All right. Well, and you get really good response rates with that. So you're doing something right. I think you're doing everything right, to be honest. And that's just the truth. You are exactly what we hope our members will do, and what we hope they will do with the program. Any final tips for being successful in this, other than not sell? You said one other thing. I can't remember what it was that I wanted to ask you about. I think it was all just the non-sales. I think I can't emphasize that enough. You said that the first words out of your mouth, and I wrote that down, is I pride myself on not being a salesperson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm pretty like unabashed, critically about our industry. And so, I mean, my main markets are professors and engineers. And so I think that they appreciate that. But at the same time, I think it speaks a lot to if you're listening to this and you're an advisor and you're struggling right now, I think it's really important for your future as a firm, or as your practice, to evaluate what your process looks like and how you're getting to work with clients and how you've been doing business. Because I just think COVID is probably the catalyst for this, but a main catalyst for this. But I think as an industry anyway, we were moving to, more fee-based, more educational in nature. So I think that that's kind of the future of our industry anyways. And maybe COVID's just kind of accelerated that.
Yeah.
The one thing I would say that to try and be helpful to people is, when I do my surveys, I put the link, I copy the link in my chat, in the chat, like the webinar chat at the very beginning. And I say, you know, this is really helpful if you could fill this out for me. It's just, I'm not going to use your information to market, but I just need to know, what I could improve, because I do these all the time and I want to improve. I also want to know what you guys found useful. And for our third workshop, I need to know what to talk about. And then I'll put a link in there. And then at the very end, I'll put the link in again and say, look, please fill this out. And I might I might say something like this. It's not mandatory, but it's the closest thing to mandatory without being mandatory. Because I really do, like, if if I want to keep getting clients, that's the only way I get clients. Like, I don't stay around after and, kind of like hang and meet and greet. And remember, I'm an engineer, right? Like, I don't like talking. So, so that's the only way that I can get clients from this thing. And so I just trust that people will fill out the surveys, but I'm clear that I would like them to fill that out.
Okay. You actually just reminded me of my other questions. Last question, I promise. You said you pitch a 3-part kind of thing. You come in, guns blazing, I want to do A, B, and C will be, employee's choice. Ever any pushback on that? Is there ever any, well, we were thinking maybe a 5-part, you get to drive that basically, right?
So, yeah. So, I think the only hesitation people have to that is they don't know me. So they don't trust that my seminars are actually good. But I tell them, and because I have a catalog of like all the feedback forms I've ever gotten. And the first seminars are always the same. It's on financial basics, and the second one's on how to retire in today's world, and the third one's attendee's choice. So it could be financial psychology, real estate, investing, starting a business. Like, it could be a special needs planning. It could be all sorts of things. But in my survey, if you're going to share it, so I think people will see that. The first 3 questions are, on a scale of 1 to 10, how usable, how enjoyable, and how clear was it? I think those are the 3. I kind of average those out of a points of 30. And my average, I've maybe gotten in front of, because remember, I teach classes at university, so I do this a lot. So in my 3 years doing Sparks Financial Ed, I've maybe gotten in front of 5,000 people in these webinars, and my average score out of 30 is it's like 27.8. So the first one is like, it's the least encroaching, most helpful, basic information that advisors generally don't talk about. And so I think that once people see that it was useful, that they enjoyed the time, then they have no qualms doing the other 2.
Right.
And basically what I say to decision makers is I'm like, look, my plan is to do 3. Let's do the first one and then see if you want to schedule the next 2. But there's kind of the expectation we're doing 3, but they're not committing to it.
Right,
but
right.
Yeah.
They could probably lock the door and not let you in if they wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. But I know that, and this sounds arrogant, but at the same time, I think my numbers back it up, is that I know that first one's going to be successful. So I know that we're going to be doing 3.
That's awesome. No, it's good. It's good to know what you're good at. I'm not going to take any more of your time, Brad. Thank you so much. Brad Sparks, Sparks Financial Education, member of AFE, complete rock star. We're grateful to have you, and I appreciate your time. And we're here if we can do anything for you.
Awesome. And good luck to everyone out there, and happy Thanksgiving.
Oh, same to you. Thanks so much.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. We're going to do a quick PS because Brad just said the thing that's the most important thing ever. Your first non-family client, just really quickly synopsize that story for me.
Yeah, basically he's an engineer, does all of his own investments, and he was like, you're never going to do any investment work. And so I said, okay, that's fine. He's like, you can help me, with banking structure, cash flow, choosing benefits, things like that. And I was young and new, and I was like, okay, I'll do that. I can use the help, and I also think I can help him in that area. So I did that. 5 years later, he's still a client. We're actually decent friends now, and I still don't do any investment work. We've done very little actually planning work that I have revenue, but he's sent me about 40 to 45% of my entire business, because, and I know I was telling Jen, is that it's because it's about relationships and valuing and respecting people. And I did that. I valued and respected him. And because of that, I earned his trust, and now he's, been a huge asset for my business. So then to build on that, I told Jen, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say mic drop. That is it. You said a lot of
Yeah.
people would have looked at that guy and said, there's no opportunity there. No opportunity for me.
Yeah. And then to build on this with Jen, because I was telling her about this in my experience at AFE, is I joined AFE thinking I was going to get mostly tech companies, engineering companies, universities, because that's my market. That's what I said I wanted. And it hasn't all been that. I mean, some of them have been that, but I've gotten a lot of more like blue collar kind of service working jobs, like, a drywall company, HVAC company. And I got a little frustrated at first, but then I realized like my whole mission is to just provide help for people and to try and meet them where they're at and value and respect them as people. And, then thinking back on that earlier client that I was talking about, like if I just do that everywhere I'm at, who knows what the opportunities are going to be anywhere that I go, right? Like anybody can know one person who becomes a great client, who introduces you to 30 great clients, right? So I think that's important to understand that and to kind of head into all of your meetings and workshops with that mentality of that people, and to value them and respect them as people and not to see them as, dollar signs.
Couldn't agree more. Well said. All right. Signing off for the second time. Thank you again, Brad. You're awesome.